How is Ruben Amorim going to line up Manchester United next season with all these new signings in the door? Cunha, Sesko and Mbeumo deals are done, and Manchester United are now working on a deal for Carlos Baleba. Now, this might seem like the lineup on paper that United could go with if everybody is fit, but we've seen in pre-season that Ruben Amorim's actually adapted the formation and tried a few different kind of formations and tweaks in pre-season. So we're going to look at multiple ways that Ruben Amorim may line up Manchester United, what his strongest 11 could be, what's his main lineup, and more, because there's a lot more to it than maybe just this. There's a lot of alternations. There's Mason Mount, there's Xerxes to come in, Ahmad can play 10, Bruno can play as the 10. There's lots of different things that Manchester United could do and lots of different varieties. And I want to break down how United could line up next season, what the tactics are, game plans for certain games. Now, I'm going to leave the back three the same, which is why I've put Shaw and Heaven behind Leacher, Maguire behind De Ligt, and Maz behind Euro. I think the back line will stay as it is, regardless of the tactical tweaks. But we're going to start with what you would probably say on paper is Manchester United's best 11. The new front three of Cunha, Sesko and Mbeumo, Dorgu and Ahmad as the wing-backs. I put Bruno and Baleba in the middle for now, but I do think it will long-term be Meno and Baleba. But Bruno's just Bruno. He's the captain. We're leaving Onana in goal because, look, if we sign Baleba and Onana has a part to play in that, Onana can stay in goal for another season. But we're going to talk about how Manchester United would line up against most teams, but maybe not the big six teams. So we're going to start with that, then how we're going to line up against the bigger teams, and then the different ways that we've lined up in pre-season, which actually might see Cunha and Mbeumo split strikers. There might be times where we play a midfield three, which could suit Bruno and Meno more. I'm going to break it all down for you guys. So, let's say we're playing Burnley next year. If we're playing Burnley next year and we sign Baleba, I expect Manchester United to be very much like this. Dorgu and Ahmad are going to be very high. Bruno's going to be there. Baleba's going to be there. And that will be United's lineup. Euro will come out here. Leacher comes out here. That is what you'd expect from Manchester United. Now, I think there will be games against maybe somewhat, like we might see the first game of the season versus Arsenal, where maybe for defensive security, we do see Dalot in here. I don't think Dalot starts on our best 11, but he might have a part to play. And when we play a team like Arsenal or Liverpool, it might be more of a back five. For example, it might even be something like, okay, Bruno maybe is a little bit more defensive. We might see, and people aren't going to like me for this, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but if we're playing a Liverpool and all of a sudden Amorim wants to be a bit more defensive, we might see something like this where, that could be the lineup. I don't think Bruno would be dropped, but all of a sudden you could see Bruno somewhere in here. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of that, but that's something Ruben Amorim could do. He could also go and utilise Mason Mount in there. Now, one thing that Ruben Amorim did in pre-season, which I quite liked, is, and I'm changing Mount back to Bruno here, but it wasn't just the sort of 3-4-3, if we're going to call it. He actually sort of played these split strikers. Obviously, where Sesko was Cunha, and let's take Baleba out for now, and he played Meno. And obviously, Dalot played where Dorgu is, but Dorgu's just so much better. And we'll put Ahmad back here. But in the game versus Everton, he played something like this. Now, it didn't fully work because the midfield was getting bullied at times, which is a big example of why we need Baleba. But we tried to move the ball quick. We tried to hit them on transition. And this idea of split strikers could work quite well because Cunha and Mbeumo and Sesko would all suit it. And this would better suit the midfield. Now, if you take Agate out for Baleba here, all of a sudden, that is a very good side. Now, for example, we'll put Cunha in here. Obviously, Sesko's in the door. But if something happens to Sesko and you play something like this in attack, or you bring Xerxes in for where Bruno is here as a facilitator if you want it a little bit more attacking, that's a very good lineup. Now we're going to go back to what Ruben Amorim is looking to do. He wants Cunha as his left 10 and Mbeumo as his right 10, but there's lots of alternatives to that. Let's say, Bruno is dropped, something happens to Bruno, we've got Sesko, but Sesko and Xerxes are such different players. Sesko and Xerxes can bring so much. Sesko is someone that is going to run the channels. He could run the channels and allow, Cunha to sometimes come in, vice versa, rotate, and Mbeumo sometimes to come in, run the channels. He's an athletic guy. Sesko is also someone that you're going to want to get in the box on the end of crosses. Dorgu is really good at making crosses. I'm also just going to say I use the website chosen11.com to do this because people always ask me, like, what do I use? And I think it's probably the best free website out there, chosen11.com. So just give them a free shout out there. But, you're going to have someone like Dorgu who can put good crosses in. Cunha likes to come more central so he can draw a player out, so that's more space for Dorgu to put a cross in. But also, Mbeumo was statistically the best crosser in the Premier League. So Sesko, who's great in the air, has Dorgu and Mbeumo that can put good crosses in. But Amad is capable of putting a good ball in the box. And when Man United are attacking, we're going to see elements of Manchester United's attack like this. And that is a pretty crazy front five. Defensively, we might get caught out, but that's like when you actually look at that, that is a pretty crazy front five. Now, I've put Xerxes behind Sesko because Sesko is someone that's going to be transition threat, runs behind. With the way that Man United are playing in pre-season, you can see that Amorim really wants to move the ball quickly, move the ball forward quickly, and that's all great. But one thing we didn't do well in that Everton game was sustain pressure. We didn't sustain pressure well in that final third. We gave the ball away a lot. And when you have someone like Xerxes that's more of a facilitator, all of a sudden, with someone that can drop deep, Cunha and Mbeumo can then make more forward runs and be closer to goal. And Xerxes can facilitate play. In fact, when you play with someone like a Xerxes, who will be the striker, for example, we'll move everybody back here. Let's say we're attacking. Xerxes will get the ball, and Xerxes could play out a nice pass here to Dorgu to run onto, or Ahmad to run onto. Cunha will get in the half space and Mbeumo will get in the half space. Xerxes will drop deep. The problem is Xerxes doesn't always quite get in the box like you want, but Mbeumo has that box instincts, and Xerxes can come more into that 10 role, and it could work really well. And this is all without, the likes of Bruno Fernandes. I put Maino in there because I think, we're looking at a long-term partner for Maino, and I think Baleba is that guy. I think Bruno is our best player. Bruno was 100% Manchester United's best player, but he's not the best fit for Amorim's system. But because he's our best player, it doesn't matter if you put Bruno 10, it doesn't matter if you put Bruno in the pivot, he will work. The one thing as well that we've got now is depth. If Cunha picks up an injury or isn't 100%, we don't need to play him. Because if Mason Mount stays fit, there's a good player there. He's looked good in pre-season. Mason Mount can play there. Now, if you're playing Mason Mount, you'd probably want Sesko to add that bit of pace. But if you're playing with a Mason Mount there, and Mbeumo and Sesko, it can work quite well. And Mbeumo picks up an injury. Well, we've got Baleba and Maino there. Bruno can play more advanced. Also, people might not like Agate, and he's not a starter quality, but Agate has a lot to offer off the ball. There's certain games where you're just going to want to win back the ball. You're just going to want someone that's going to win duels and be a nuisance. And there's certain games out there that Agate will suit for us. Agate's also done quite well as an 8. He's just not a 6. When you want to build out, when you want to dominate possession, Agate's not the guy. But in some of the bigger games, you could use someone like Agate in there. He's got a bit of use. Casemiro, while his legs are gone, he can always bring experience. So players like Casemiro and Agate aren't completely useless as backups. If something did happen to Cunha and Mbeumo, then all of a sudden Bruno can go in there, or even really, let's say something happened to Bruno, all of a sudden Ahmad can go in there, and Manchester United's depth isn't completely awful. Now, I don't like the look of that team there, but if we go back to what Manchester United's strongest 11 is believed to be next season, it's likely to be Mbeumo, Sesko and Cunha here. Now, there's talk of should we sell Højlund or not, but Cunha can cover there, Xerxes can cover there. There's a lot of cover there. Dorgu, I think, is going to have a good season. The question is, there's not really much backup to him. I guess Delo is Dorgu backup. I guess Delo is backup to Dorgu and Amma, but we don't really like Delo at left wing back here. But again, there's lots of ways that we can line up. So we'll go back to putting Bruno in here. We already know as well that Kobbie Mainoo can play as a 10 if need be. We actually at times have seen Kobbie Mainoo link up quite well on the right. Not that I want Mainoo to potentially be a 10, but we also know that Mainoo can work there. We know that Mount can go in there. We know that Manchester United have got a lot of options. They've got Mainoo, they've got Ahmad. We'll put Bruno in there. You actually look at the amount of options Manchester United have, and all of a sudden it actually feels like with one game a week, this is pretty good depth. We could even put Obi in there. I wouldn't say he's completely ready. You could put Diego Leon in here. If we're looking at another potential fullback option, and you're looking at Manchester United, and all of a sudden the depth in midfield isn't too bad. Now, the big question I have with this team is I don't like how the central centre-back steps up in possession. I think Matthijs de Ligt is a very good centre-back, and he's a very good player for Manchester United to have, but he sometimes has to step up into midfield, which raises the question, could we try something different and actually have someone like Casemiro there who steps up into midfield, and all of a sudden you have more of a midfield free? Could we try Aiden Heaven? Aiden Heaven could be the long-term central centre-back. And all of a sudden, we could have a backline of Leacher, Heaven, Euro. There might be questions around physicality, but Baleba's 6 foot. He's taller than people think. Dorgu's faster and stronger than people think. There might be questions over Amma, but Yoro's such a good defender he can cover there. You've also got Mazraoui to come in. But all of a sudden, it looks like Manchester United have quite a good lineup. Let me know your thoughts down below. Baleba obviously isn't in the door, but if Baleba comes in, I'm fine with having Onana in goal for another year. I want a new keeper, but if you're saying to me, crap midfielder and a good keeper, or Baleba, I'm taking Baleba.